Episode 4, Beneath the Boardwalk. Maya didn't return to the safety of the motel. Instead, she marched straight into the Blackwood Bay police station, the morning rain dripping from her coat. The lobby was silent, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. Chief Thomas Vance sat behind his desk, a man built of granite and iron-willed secrets. Maya didn't say a word as she slapped the Polaroid onto his desk blotter. "Explain this, Thomas," she demanded. "Explain why you were standing over my bed while I slept." Thomas didn't flinch. He looked at the photo, then up at Maya, with eyes as gray and unforgiving as the Atlantic. Without a word, he reached across the desk and snatched Maya's camera bag and her digital recorder. "Evidence," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You're interfering with an ongoing investigation and trespassing on private property, Ms. Lynn. In this town, that's enough to put you away for a long time." Thomas stood up, his massive frame blotting out the weak light from the office window. He leaned over the desk, his shadow stretching long and dark across the floor. "You have 1 hour to pack your bags and cross the bridge," he whispered, the threat hanging heavy in the air. "If I see you in Blackwood Bay afternoon, I'll have you in a cell until the harbor freezes over. Get out of my sight." Maya didn't leave town. Instead, she met Dr. Eveleyn Reed behind the rusted skeletons of the old cannery. Rain began to drum rhythmically against the roof of Evelynn's car as they sat in the shadows. "He took everything," Maya hissed, her hands gripping the dashboard until her knuckles turned white. Eveleyn looked toward the distant pier. "He's hiding the truth under the boardwalk, the old Neptune Grotto funhouse. He bought it years ago through a shell company. It's the only place he goes where he thinks no one is watching." The boardwalk groaned under the assault of the rising tide as they navigated the shadows beneath the pilings. Below the sagging wooden planks, the air was thick with the smell of rotting kelp and old machine grease. They reached the entrance of the Neptune Grotto, a faded facade of a grinning sea god whose paint was peeling like dead skin. A closed sign had hung on the door for 20 years, but the lock on the gate was brand new. Eveleyn pulled a heavy crowbar from her medical bag, her face set in a grim line. "I've spent 20 years cutting open the dead to find the truth," she whispered. "I'm not stopping now for a corrupt cop." With a sharp, agonizing groan of metal on wood, she forced the side door open. Maya held a small emergency flashlight, its narrow beam cutting through the oppressive darkness of the funhouse interior. Inside, the Neptune Grotto was a graveyard of mechanical horrors. Dust-covered mermaids with cracked porcelain faces stared from the shadows, their glass eyes reflecting Maya's light. She led the way through the labyrinth of tilted floors and rotting velvet curtains. Near the back of the Tunnel of Love, she spotted something out of place, a modern steel hatch set into the concrete floor, hidden behind a stack of moth-eaten costumes. They descended a narrow iron ladder into a room that smelled of motor oil and ozone. It wasn't part of a funhouse. It was a reinforced bunker. Crates were stacked to the ceiling, marked with shipping labels from overseas and stamped with police property. Eveleyn scanned the room, her brow furrowed as she looked at the high-end electronics and industrial chemicals. "This isn't a hiding spot," she noted. "This is a distribution hub. He's been smuggling through the bay for a decade." Maya's light landed on a small shelf in the corner. There, covered in a thin layer of grit, sat Chloe's bright yellow backpack. Next to it lay a leather-bound notebook with Clara embossed in fading gold. Maya picked up the journal, her heart racing as she flipped through the pages. The entries were frantic, detailing Thomas's involvement in a smuggling operation that used the town's police resources as cover. Clara had documented everything before she vanished. Eveleyn leaned over Maya's shoulder, her eyes scanning the last entry in the journal. "He wasn't just protecting a politician's secret," Eveleyn whispered, her voice trembling. "He was using that leverage to run his own empire. Chloe must have found this journal in her father's things. She was going to go to the federal authorities. He didn't just kill her to keep the past quiet. He killed her to protect his business. A sudden, heavy thud echoed through the bunker, vibrating the concrete walls. Maya and Eveleyn spun around just as the steel hatch at the top of the ladder slammed shut. They heard the unmistakable sound of a heavy metal bolt sliding into place from the outside. They were trapped 10 feet beneath the sand, and the silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise of the tide above. A sharp chemical scent began to waft through the air vents. Maya knelt by the bottom of the ladder, her eyes widening as a translucent liquid began to seep over the threshold from the hatch above. It trickled down the wall and pooled around her boots, shimmering with an oily rainbow in the flashlight's glow. "Gasoline," she choked out. From somewhere above, the distinct, crisp scratch of a match being struck sounded like a thunderclap in the small room.